Hello, friends. We are in a troubling time when it comes to misinformation. Here at Forbidden Knowledge News, I've always taken an unbiased, open-minded, and responsible approach to presenting my own theories, and the views of our guests do not reflect that of my own. This show is for entertainment purposes only, and any information presented during this show is a live-action role-play scenario. Conspiracies are definitely fun to discuss in a responsible way. My suggestion to everyone that has an audience and presents theories and possibilities should present them as such, and in no way present unsubstantiated information as truth. All that being said, enjoy this episode. Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Juan Ayala. First, an exciting announcement. Our newest affiliate, Brainsupreme, is having a 25% off sale from October 25th through November 1st when you use code FKN25 at checkout. You can also just click that link right in the description. When you order using that link or visit brainsupreme.co/discount/FKN25, you'll get 25% off your entire order and start your microdosing journey today. Also, watch the Forbidden documentary Occult Louisiana. That's on Tubi and multiple streaming platforms. Get a Rokfin premium membership, rokfin.com/FKN+. And if you listen through any audio provider, download our episodes through Spreaker. Today, I want to welcome back to the show Juan Ayala. He is an avid researcher, truth seeker, podcaster, and host of the One-on-One podcast, which is a show where he talks about life, current events, esoterica, conspiracy theories, and other mysteries of the universe. His goal with creating his podcast is to ask the hard questions and share knowledge on certain esoteric topics. Juan, welcome back. How you doing?
What's up, dude? It's been a little bit. Thanks for having me back on. It's always a fun time to chop it up
Always,
with you.
man. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. We spoke briefly about what you're going to be discussing. It's still a bit of a mystery to me, but I'm very excited about this because it relates to your homunculus research and dreams, which I am currently producing a film that relates to dreams. So we have a lot to discuss here. Before we do, remind the audience a little bit about yourself and the One-on-One podcast.
So I'm the host of the One-on-One podcast. You can find it at tjojp.com. All my stuff is on there. You can find the Homunculus Owner's Manual along with some other self-published occult and esoteric. I call this the Armchair Occultist Reader's Digest, right? And the latest one that we put out is 88 pages of all things homunculus. You can get that on there. And I am also very excited to announce that I am working on what do I call this? We still don't have a name for it. Where the hell did it go? But I'm working, this is the playtest set, but I'm working on an alchemical trading card game, I guess you could call
Sweet.
it. So we've been working hard with, yeah, dude, it's going to be sick, man. I love the concept of this one. So it's going to be, like if you've ever played Magic the Gathering or anything like that, it's going to be sort of similar, but with our own twist on it. And you can play as John Dee, Edward Kelly, Aleister Crowley. You can play as all the greatest hits and some.
Rock and roll, man.
So it's going to be a lot of fun. That should be coming out We're in the play testing phase, so we should be ready to rock and roll here soon enough. But that's what I've been up to really, and I'm excited to get into what we're going to be talking about today.
I am too. And speaking of, give us a little introduction. You mentioned homunculus, and that got my nipples hard. And then you mentioned dreams, and I'm ready to go. So, what we got going on?
As it should. So I've been kind of looking into. I don't know if you've seen the movie Homunculus on
No, I have
Netflix.
not.
So check it out. It's based on a manga that came out in, I don't know the year it came out in, but I've been working on a little something. And the reason it relates to dreams and sort of the astral realm, I did recently finish Robert Monroe's Journeys Out of the Body. Now, the whole thing with when it comes to all this esoteric and astral realm and yada 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 is that it's a lot of source. Trust me, bro, right? Like you need to experience what's going on for you to really grasp what this person was going through. Now, the concept of dreams has been since the beginning of time. There was dream incubation temples. You know all of that. Have I ever talked to you about my, which kind of relates to what I'm going to be talking about, my skull fuck method
Oh,
technique? Have I ever told
no,
you
you
about
have
that?
not. Please do.
Okay. So check this out, bro. So there's a technique that it's called the skull fuck method. Now, there's various ways, and there's two specific ways that I've learned to recollect my dreams, right? So to be able to remember your dreams, because that's what everybody wants to do, right? So you can start off by remembering your dreams, and then there's the people who can astral project, who can do the stuff in the astral realm, right? They can step outside of their body. I've never experienced that. The closest I've gotten to that was I had like a waking dream one time, which was weird. And then also for a majority of my life, I had the sleep paralysis
Mhm.
phenomenon. So I'd wake up and I'd be frozen, but I never saw any entities, but I did feel a sense of dread, like you're gonna die. Like the highest level of anxiety that you've ever felt, you feel it at that moment. And then I had experienced it so much that I'm able to peel out of that state of consciousness I get rather
Mhm.
quickly. Right, you do the whole, you can hear yourself like kind of struggling, and then you just like wake
Yeah, been
up.
there.
And I've had sleep paralysis 2, 3 times a night,
Mm.
some nights. Never saw anything. And you always tell yourself, I'm going to stick around. I'm not going to be a bitch. And I'm going to stick around and look at these these shadow people straight in their eyeballs. And I'm going to tell them to go away. Dude, it's that scary
Mm.
that you just go, something is about to grab me. I'm going to die if I don't wake up. So you're just focused on peel out. And then you just, wake up. But that's as close as I've gotten to the
Mhm.
astral, I
Mhm.
guess. I'm trying to find the article here. Give me
That's
one
funny. I've had
second.
very similar experiences with sleep paralysis. This was many years ago when I was in a really bad state of mind going through a divorce, and I didn't directly see entities in front of me, but out of the corner of the eye, I could see it was like shadows of people walking down the hall. Not just one person, it was like there was a party going on in the next room of shadow people. And then on my ceiling, they would start to have this loud banging that would get louder and louder. And that feeling of dread would grow with each bang on the ceiling until I'd eventually just get so scared shitless I'd have to pull myself out of it. But yeah, I know what you're talking about with that sense of dread.
There's two techniques that you can use I'm sure there's more. The two that I've learned. One was taught to me he talked to me about and introduced me to it, which Manly P. Hall actually taught him. Ronnie Pontiac. I don't know if you've had him on the
No,
show
I
yet.
haven't.
Uh, oh, you should. He worked at the PRS with Manly P. Hall, and he knew him. He married him actually. So you should check him out. Ronnie Pontiac. He wrote Metaphysical America, I believe is the name of his book. Really great guy. And he talked to me about the Pythagorean recollection that Manly P. Hall taught him. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to, when before you fall asleep, you're supposed to remember your day backwards. Okay. So you start off with what you did at the beginning and you recall it all the way towards the end.
Mm.
Now, start off small. right? Start off with the first half of your day because you can easily forget what you did that day or whatever it was, step by step. But just do like a review of your day back from the very, from the time you woke up all the way to the time of when you're there now. And it's supposed to train your mind to recall your dreams somehow. Now, I've tried that one. I've had results. I've tried it a few times. You have to work on it. You have to at least do it for a little bit and you'll start to notice a difference. But the one that really put me beyond where I was like, this is bizarre. It's going to sound weird. You don't have to use the imagery that I'm going to present to you. But I think that the bizarreness of it helps with that recollection for some reason. So I came across this I came across this. I don't know if you've ever seen those USB drives. I got the Sacred Text USB drive, the Sacred Text
Yeah.
website that has all like the
Yeah.
esoteric and occult books. So I ended up getting the little drive and I used that or used it there's a random book generator on there. And sometimes, when you're trying to come up with an idea it's like, I don't know how many thousands of books in this little drive. So I plugged it in and I was trying to look for an episode topic for like something, to cover or just like inspire some ideas. And I was hitting the random generate and it popped up the skull fucking exercise and dream recall. Obviously, I was like, what in the world? Because it sounds bizarre. So what it is, the purpose, and it took me to this website, and this is from 2002. The purpose, this exercise is to aid in the recollection of dreams through the use of visualization and tactical imagery. It is best performed at the times that one begins to fall asleep. Now, I'm sure you've learned about dream yoga and like the positions of which you sleep in. I'm a stomach sleeper, so I like to sleep on my stomach. Sometimes you don't get the best results, so it's best to do what they call the dead man's pose or something like that, where you lay on your back, and you're relaxing. You're just supposed to be in just a neutral position. So relax, take a few deep breaths, and concentrate on the present sensation of your extremities. We know this through if you've ever done the hemisync and the gateway experience, we know you have to lay there and kind of go into a meditative state in order to, sync your hand. You're listening to these binaural beats until they start to sync together. Allow yourself to feel the gradual decrease in sensitivity of the limbs as you drop off to sleep. Switch your attention rapidly from limb to limb, but block out extraneous thought as completely as possible. When nearly all sensation is lost in the extremities, switch your attention to your spine. So you ever, I'm sure it's happened to you where you're laying there and your body wants to either twitch or you get an itch because your body's like, you got to feel that. You got to get past all that. Your nose is going to itch. Your ear is probably going to itch. You just got to lay there until you get to that state where you don't really feel your limbs. Okay. And then you're going to switch your attention to the spine. Now, this is where it gets a little weird. Okay. Localize your attention to the sensation of each vertebrae. Send a current of energy up from the base very slowly to the top. And the way you do this is by visualizing a light. When the current reaches the top, visualize the entire spine as a penis. And so what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to lay there and visualize a current of light going up your spine all the way to the top, right? And just every vertebrae going up. And it sounds bizarre, but I promise you it works, dude. I don't know what it is. It works. At the point of where it enters the skull as a sexually oriented orifice of your choice. So what I imagine is my spinal column becomes a giant blue Nephilim dick. And it's entering the bottom of your skull. There's hence the name skull fuck method. So you're getting fucked by a giant blue Nephilim as you're trying to do this, okay? Concentrate now on the sensation of the spine penis entering the foramen magnum orifice, which is the opening at the bottom of the skull. When bringing the sensation to the conscious level, recall that it is your penis and or your orifice. A great deal of sensation is being generated. I didn't feel this part. Okay, so you're supposed to, I guess, essentially orgasm. Are you doing this? I ain't orgasm. I didn't do that part. Hold the images and sensations in mind until you do, in fact, fall asleep. So maybe if I start to, visualize a little bit, it might even send me above and beyond. Who knows? In fact, fall asleep. Attempt immediately to hold your dream hands in front of your eyes. By practicing this daily, your total recall is achieved in a relatively short time. Now, I was a skeptic when I did this, right? It's weird. This is not something that you tell people you're going to do. Like, hey, I'm going to picture a giant blue dick fucking my skull at night before I go to bed every night. Yeah, it's not something you share with your friends or like you let your wife know unless you're like moaning in your sleep. Like, what
Unless
are you
she's
doing?
into that, you know.
Unless she's into that. Hey, who knows,
Yeah.
right? So this guy put it out. His name is they're from the Temple of Babel. Like wild-eyed boy from Free Clouds, Sri Palindrome. 151. Shout out to Sri Palindrome from 2002 for putting this out. And he goes, I've sent this out because I found that better access to one's dreams often equates to finding a lot of excellent raw material for personalized magical work. Insofar as many of the archetypes to be worked with can be found there. It took about 30 days of work before I actually got this functioning correctly, but my own dream recollection is approximately 90% now. And I often remember several dreams from the same night. Also, my lucidity is at around 10% of total. Dude, when I tried this the first few nights, I can remember like a lot of my dream because usually you remember a dream, but it's kind of fuzzy. This, for some reason, clears that up, dude. So I need you to do this, Chris. I need you to document for your documentary what you're finding, or get a group of people together and try and do it, right? And each one recalls what they experienced. Now, you don't have to use a giant penis. You can use a bow and arrow, right? And you picture the bottom of your skull as a target, or a key in a hole. Again, it's as long as it's like phallus like and there's an opening, whatever. If you want to do the penis, go ahead. I did the penis. Does that make me gay? I don't know. Maybe a little bit. Maybe in the
Hey,
astral
it
realm, I'm a
seems to
little
be
flamboyant.
effective.
Hey, it might all be fake and gay, Chris. I don't know, but
Right,
it
right.
works. So I think that this is part of like, remembering your dreams. Now, the whole thing with Robert Monroe is that one of the aspects that really interested me was that he was going into these other realities and essentially possessing somebody, and their body was a sort of vessel. He remembers entire cities with an entire ecosystem and an entire economy in these other worlds, almost like dream cities or something. And he recalls about essentially possessing this one guy throughout his entire life. And, when he first gets there, he hadn't met a girl. Then the next time that he possesses him, he meets the girl and they have a family or something along those lines. And then I believe, I forgot, he did it one more time. It was one or two times, but he remembers every time that he took over his body, the guy was either having a conversation or was in the middle of something, and he'd completely black out. And so he knew that because he jumped in and there was a conversation he was having with his wife or something like that. And she's like, you always do this, like every now and again, you'll just completely black out and you don't remember that you had this and this. And it's almost like he's borrowing his body, but the consciousness of that guy, the memories of that guy aren't staying there. So of course, I don't know if you've ever had this when you walk into a room and you forget what you were gonna do. Like, were you possessed for like 1 second, then something enter you, and somebody else borrowed it for they say that the way the doors are shaped, it cuts off your astral body for a second, right? And that's why at these cathedrals or churches, there's always that window, that circular window. That's for people's astral bodies that are attached by the silver cord to walk in through at the same time, right? You
Yes,
ever
I
hear about that?
have. Yeah, that.
Like the soul
Yeah,
windows, I
yeah,
guess you call
yeah.
them.
There's so many things that I'm super fascinated when it comes to exiting our body in astral travel. I have never really achieved that state either. The closest I've come is with heavy doses of psychedelics. And once you reach a state where you're in your consciousness, you're not really utilizing your physical body and you're interacting with things, you're getting information, it is very dreamlike. And when you come back from that state, immediately, even with psychedelics in my experience, you start to forget and the dream starts to dissipate. It becomes blocky and hard to remember certain parts. But that's very interesting. I wonder if the same thing can be done to remember different meditative states or other altered states, if you will.
And that's the interesting part about these substances. Like, for example, if you take a healthy dose of, psilocybin, you're able to recall pretty much the whole trip, unless you're doing like a heroic dose or something like that. But you're able to recall pretty much the entire trip, and you can talk about it, right? It's just like being regular, except you have the visualizations and all that. And about when I did my first trip, I had audio hallucinations. So I was like hearing things too, and it's like, whoa, what was that? Not like voices, but it got to a point where you felt like there was something bigger talking to you in a weird way. I don't know if that makes sense, where it's like it wasn't an actual voice. It wasn't like, oh, God's talking to me. It was like something telling you, almost like you're something from beyond, like telling you, and you were just you just knew, right? You could just tap in. And so Monroe also talks about, right, jumping into other people's bodies. And this is the first book of, I think, 3 books. And then the second and third book, he gets a little bit more deeper. I haven't read those yet. But one of the aspects that interested me the most was these entities that he would encounter in this other realm. These entities being sort of demonic in nature, very sexual in nature. There's something about sexualness. And then when they would interact with him just by physical touch, it would be sexual in nature, and there would be like a shock. So he said that sometimes they would just grab onto you and he'd have to go back to his body. Now, the interesting part about that is that Paracelsus talked about that when a man has negative thoughts, things will attach to himself, right? And you create a sort of psychic egregore, or I've heard it put sometimes you develop a watcher. And this could perhaps, because not too long ago, dude, in 15th, 16th, 17th century, a lot of illnesses were attributed to magical means, right? So, and they treated these uh, illnesses in a magical way, right? So they, for example, it was Roger Bacon, either Roger Bacon or Robert Flood, one of the two. I get them mixed up. I've been doing a lot of research for these cards. One of them had a remedy. He had a remedy for healing wounds, and it involved like using the original weapon that caused the wound to heal the wound in some sort of weird way. Let me look it up here real quick so I can read it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it was Robert Flood. And all right, so Robert Flood, philosopher, physician, and writer on the occult, supported the use of a weapon salve to treat wounds. A salve was a mixture of blood, moss, and flesh from a corpse that was applied to the weapon that caused the wound. Flood believed that the salve worked because the weapon and the wound had similar qualities and would sympathize with each other. He also uses understanding of magnetism to support the weapon salve, arguing that the process was rooted in the same magnetic forces that could be observed in nature. So again, this was the thought of this guy was in the 16th century, so it wasn't that long ago that they believed in these sort of it was a way of, in a sympathetic magical way, the law of correspondence, right? That they could link this, so he was able to heal your wound, right? So the idea that certain parallel actions could be initiated and linked by sympathetic mysterious forces was widespread at this time, probably arising from the actions of the magnet shown by William Gerber to always point towards some point in the northern sky. The idea owed a lot of older Aristotelian and Neoplatonic views about soul-like forces. So again, this is something that they did practice back then, and this is just one of many. But the concept of perhaps depression or something else, and I don't know if you've had the guy on where he talks about schizophrenia actually being demons and like a demonic force. I forget his name, but people probably know who I'm talking about. And so when you think about this other realm that is overlaid over ours, and that maybe perhaps there are things behind the scenes influencing us, you can call those the archons, how the Gnostics talked about them, or XYZ. And one of the things, linking it back to the Homunculus movie in the manga, was that this movie shows that all the things, all the deepest, darkest traumas of people, they're attached to them in the form of homunculi. So, how do you acquire this power to be able to view these homunculi on people or view the other realm? When it comes to magic or the occult or the esoteric or whatever it is, there's a lot of mumbo jumbo that's involved. You have to do this certain ritual, this certain ceremony to acquire godlike powers. And the point of the alchemists that were creating the homunculus, they were then taking those homunculus and then using those homunculus to acquire those godlike powers. So they wrote entire instructional books on how to dissect your homunculus to be able to use its liver wrapped in its forehead skin, and you could see demons or XYZ. You know, like a certain concoction, but you had to first create that homunculus. That sounds like a lot of work to me, right? Like, oh, you got to collect the sunstone and some magnet and some, the biggest dog dick you could ever find. It's like, that's a lot of work. I don't know where I'd start to find the biggest dog dick you ever find. I mean, it's in the instructional manual. Can you use another type of dick? Like, who knows? Like, can I use my own dick? I don't know what you can do, but then you need a whole cow carcass sourcing. That's going to probably be a problem. What if what if the government catches you, like your local government catches you with a dead count? What are you doing? Like, what's going on? What kind of freak experiment are you running? So in the homunculus manga and in the movie, the main character, not to spoil it too much if you guys haven't seen it, came out in 2019, I think, 2020. A little bit. So I've watched the movie a few times. And I recently watched it again while I was at work. I just put it on. I'm like, man, I should probably I've always talked about this, but I should do a breakdown. But I don't want to do a breakdown of the movie until I read the manga. So I read the manga, and the manga is way more messed up than the movie because it gives you a lot more background on the main character than you could ever fit in the hour and a half movie. So I read the manga. And essentially in the movie, or in the manga, the concept, I don't know if you've ever heard of trepanning or trepanation or trepanation, trefining, like they call it different things, but essentially what it is to drill a hole in your skull. And in this manga, in this story, Homunculus, the guy is in a liminal space. So he's almost like, he is not fully homeless, but he's not successful because he got laid off of he was doing insurance brokeraging essentially. But what he was doing was he was assigned for the insurance companies. He would come up with how much, I think it was either insurance or something along those lines. How much money they could loan you, how much you were worth. So he was literally giving people a dollar value to their life. And this is what he would do. He would just like do all the calculations. Like they're in this much debt, they make this much money, they're worth X amount. And that's what the insurance company would either pay out, or I think it was either insurance or, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was insurance. I have to double check. I have a whole presentation on it that I'll be doing way more in depth on the manga on my channel. But trepanning or trepanation comes from the Greek trupanon, literally bore or auger. And it's actually one of the oldest operations in existence. It goes back to, these Neolithic skulls that they find. Sometimes they'd have up to 7 holes in their skull. And in this movie, in this manga, the point was the guy, he was living in between being homeless and successful, but he wouldn't really commit to either lifestyle, right? In the story. And so he was chosen by this rich kid, what Tripley would call a trust fund dork, right? Can you hear that?
No. Hear what?
You can't hear that? I don't know what's going on. Do we had technical issues at the beginning? I mean, like they're tapping into this conversation right now or something's going on, but I could keep hearing like crackling.
It's that deep homunculus talk, man.
It's the skull fuck method, dude. I told you I shouldn't have told you about that. So this guy was chosen by this wealthy medical student, right? And his dad owns a hospital. And he chooses him because he is in this liminal space. He's like, you're not homeless, but you're also not living in society. You live in your car in front of a park and you interact with the homeless people, but every now and again you go to the hotel across the street, which is one of the most expensive hotels in that part of Japan. So you're like living in between these two worlds. And I'm going to pay you to let me drill a hole in your skull. And he explains to him everything about the lore of trepanation and trepanning. And he's like, listen, just let me do this. It doesn't hurt. It's very quick. It won't hurt you. It's like, he says, it's like drilling into a tooth. Right. So he finally agrees to it. And he asks him like, hey, what's the point of this? And he tells him the reason that you want to do it is in order to, I'm trying to find it. It'll develop your sixth sense. You'll get ESP. In short, you see spirits and get ESP and stuff like that. He says in the manga. I have screenshots here. So let's do it. I've done it before. But the problem is that the people he's done it to before, spoiler alert, they end up either going insane or killing themselves. So they end up doing the operation. And during the 16th and 17th century, all right, so trepanation is a surgical intervention in which a hole is drilled or scraped into the human skull. Now you can find videos on this. There's a few different documentaries you can watch on this. One of the main ones is called A Hole in the Head, is one of the main ones. And there's another one that's called Heartbeat in the Brain. That it's a weird one because it's not available anywhere, and it's one of these lost media. Creepy pasta type of things, but it exists because there's excerpts from it, there's clips from it. And one of the guys to put out some of the clips was that guy from Vice. What's his name? Is it Mark Hamilton? You know what I'm talking about?
I'm not sure his name though.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, that pharmacopoeia guy that he talked about the psychedelics and all that stuff. He had put out a few different clips of it, but it's a documentary about this woman who does self-trepanation. So you can actually do this procedure to yourself. And dude, there's an entire subculture of people who have done this to themselves. Whoa. And they openly talk about it, of drilling a hole into their skull.
Didn't Jeffrey Dahmer also do that to his victims?
I think he did. He injected something into a hole of a skull of one of his victims. Yeah, he was trying to turn him into a zombie, I believe, is what he was trying to do. But essentially, whenever you get a procedure done in your brain, they're trepanning. They have to trepanate you, and then they can work inside your skull. So there's a whole entire subculture of people who have done this to themselves. There's videos of African tribes doing this without any anesthesia, bro. Like nothing. They rub like some leaves on your head and stuff like that, but they literally show the video. If you're squeamish, don't look this up, but they literally cutting into the scope of this girl, opening up the skull, and then they're essentially just scraping away the bone until they get a hole in the skull. It's gnarly, dude. So one of the things is the beliefs behind it is, right? So it may also refer, let me find it here. The intentional perforation of the cranium exposes the dura to treat health problems related to intracranial diseases or release pressure, blood buildup from an injury. So obviously if somebody has, any sort of head injury, head trauma, the brain swells up, so they will cut holes in your skull to relieve that pressure. That's done nowadays. It may also refer to any burr hole created through other body surfaces, including nail beds. A trephine is an instrument used for cutting out a round piece of skull bone to relieve pressure beneath the surface. So the trephine is the actual instrument. Trepanation is the procedure. In ancient times, holes were drilled into a person who was behaving in what was considered an abnormal way to let out what people believe were evil demons. Now, they replaced that with lobotomies.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why you have all these stories of people getting lobotomies in these insane asylums, because instead of drilling the hole into their head so that the spirit could come out, they're like, let's just, do actual brain damage and see what happens then. So they're disconnecting. I forget what it is. In the top of your skull, they put a whole rod. Yeah, or even a rod through your eye. And sometimes the bone that was trepaned was kept by the prehistoric people and may have been worn as a charm to keep evil spirits away. So again, used as a sort of talisman of some sort, right? They would keep the little bone. And it goes on here. Trepanation dates back to from 7 to 10,000 years. So it's one of the oldest surgical procedures with archaeological evidence. Some areas, again, have skulls with 6-7 holes in them all over the head, bro. It's wild. At one burial site in France dated back to 6500 BCE, 40 out of 120 prehistoric skulls found had trepanation holes. And they knew that the people were living because you could see where it would heal or where it wouldn't. A lot of people would die. So think about it. I mean, in the 65 BCE, First of all, how are you opening up the scalp? How are you drilling, scraping away at the skull? Sometimes they would just like chip away at it. Imagine, well, you chip a little bit too much. Whoops, he's got a piece of his brain, and then they could tell depending on the cracks on the skull if it healed or not. This person died shortly after because it's still cracked. Because if not, it would have healed together. Because the body will actually heal it. So these African tribes are doing this procedure, and they get scalped back over where the hole is, dude. But they're walking around with this much of their head missing at the top.
God.
But you can see their brain pulse.
Jesus.
Okay. It's that gnarly. At the time, only 40% of people survived the procedure during 6500 BCE. There also exists of trepanation being performed on a cow in France. If performed while alive, the cow did not survive the procedure. It isn't clear if it was performed as a veterinary procedure, medical experimentation, or any other reason. Maybe the dude was trying to make a homunculus, right? He was trepanning the cow and try to put the homunculus in its brain so he could, make a homunculus. Who knew? You have pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, ancient China, medieval East Africa, pre-modern Europe. Okay, so this has been around for quite a while, and like I said, it was replaced. It was trepanation where they drilled holes into the lobotomy. What the reason for that? I mean, we can apply a conspiracy to it. Maybe they don't want people developing their sixth sense. Maybe they realize that, hey, by drilling into this person's skull, because the idea is it increases the amount of blood that goes up into your air and aerates the amount of blood in your head, because through the evolution of man, if we did come from a primordial ooze and evolved into monkeys and then we're able to sit upright. Well, the idea is that by you sitting upright, what happens when you stand on your head for too long? Right? So don't do that, because what the blood is going to rush out of your head. Well, if you're standing up all the time, obviously we have the arteries and all that, and the function of the heart to pump it up. Well, according to these self-trepanists, I guess you could call them, we don't get enough blood supply to our brains. Okay. And by you opening up a hole, it's going to allow for the brain to pulsate how it's supposed to, because these people who trepanate, they say that they feel their brains pulsating like a heartbeat. And also they hear the gurgling sound of your body filling up the void of air when you open up that hole to the bro. It is so gnarly. But think about this. Let's step back for 1 second. I mentioned about the occult. I mentioned about the acquisition of supernatural powers. What if, right, the ceremonial aspect of it, making talismans, gathering the dog dicks, the cows, all that is too much for you? What a better way, Chris, than to apply, and I'm not saying do this.
Please don't.
But if you do, hit me up, right? So the concept is you're giving somebody something that they can physically do to acquire these powers, even if you don't. Now, the people who have done it have reported a sense of high that they get, a sense of euphoria. Some people compare it to the effects of cannabis without having actually smoking cannabis, a sort of high. Now, I'm not sure if anyone has report. I could be wrong. This is still developing. ESP or anything like that. But in the homunculus story, the dude ends up developing psychic abilities. Okay. And he is able to see people's homunculus. So in the manga, versus he's outside and a wind blows dirt into his eye and into his left eye. So he's outside right after being trepanned. He's got the wrap around his head, and he covers his eye to get the dirt out. And when he looks up, everyone is a monster. Everyone is distorted. Everyone looks a weird type of way, right? And the idea is that what he is seeing is not only a reflection of his inner self, because part of it is if you're staring at these homunculus, the homunculus are staring back at you, right? So if you stare into the abyss long enough, the abyss will start to stare back at you. So the homunculus you're seeing are an illusion of yours but at the same time they're a reflection of yours. And the manga really gets super dark. There are grape scenes in it, if you get what I'm saying, right? So there's that. So just keep that in mind. In the movie as well, he kind of sort of grapes this girl's homunculi. It's really, yeah, it's really bizarre. It's weird. But he sees these other entities that are attaching themselves to him. Now, this is interesting because all these cultures that I've talked to you about, right? And if this trepanation, because the shaman class is this class of people who are able to work in both the astral and the physical, right? This liminal people, and they knew all the secrets. So in a lot of these cultures, the shamans were the ones that would do the trepanation. And not only that, but they themselves would have trepanation done on themselves. So these shamans were the people who could extract these evil spirits away from people, who could heal people, and they're one of the ones doing this. But they also had the trepanation done to themselves, almost as if they could see on the other side. Now, the main character kind of takes on this shamanic role because he is the ultimate psychologist, bro. And it gets into archetypes, and they even mention Jungian archetypes in the manga. So you know that the guy who wrote it is reading all this occult lore and everything about the homunculus. They talk about the alchemical homunculus. They talk about all this stuff. And so the main character is then able to not only see these homunculi on other people, which manifest different ways. There's one where the girl is made up of different words, right? And every word is like very sexual, but she looks like a sand monster, right? There's one where there's a girl talking on the phone who probably is hearing something sexual on the other line, and her bottom half is spinning around, right? It's like almost she's like excited sexually in a sort of like weird way. And like they break down a whole bunch of different ones. Now, he interacts with certain characters in the story. And what he's able to do is he looks at them. He gets to a point in the manga where he actually sews his eye shut. So his left eye is always shut. He literally gets stitches on it. So he can always see the world for what it really is, right? And people for what they really are. Now, the issue with this is, what does my homunculus look like?
Right.
You don't know unless somebody else either got the procedure done, or in this story, there are people who can see your homunculus, what they call the soul, right? Your heart. They call it like your real heart. And arguably, I mean, there's people from all over the world who have talked about having ESP or psychic abilities of some sort where they're able to see beyond, see the future, or fucking do tarot. Like, who knows, right? Like, they're able to do something that is supernatural in nature without having to drill a hole into their head. But for anyone who is, right, wanting to quench that Faustian bargain of like, damn, I want some superpower. I want to be able to see homunculus in the astral realm, like these astral homunculus. What can I do? Oh, I could probably do like self-trepanation. What do I got to do for that? Just drill a hole. They sell a kit, little anesthesia or lidocaine or something, and you just expose the front of the skull, whatever it is. Say you do it up here, you drill in there, and then the rest is history.
That's crazy.
So it's like giving someone something physical. Like, you can do that. Yeah. Anyone can do that. You can take these, entheogenic substances and then see what happens, and you can experience it yourself. So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of like, hey, source, trust me, bro. In this case, you gotta do it. And dude, there's plenty of people who have done it. I'm not advocating for it, but again, if you end up doing it, let me know so we can do a podcast.
Right on.
But you get what I'm saying? Like, this is a physical thing that people can do, and I think that's what really calls to people to do this. And there's let me pull up here a couple other people who have done it and talk about them.
It seems like some folks will go to just extreme lengths to discover what could be out there. Have you ever had James True on?
No.
He does research into the possibility that in elite circles, celebrity circles, very powerful politicians, global leaders, the ones that get the black eyes, that they're not being punched in the face, that it is a parasitic injection of some sort into the pineal gland that is a consciousness a hive mind sort of parasite that not only keeps these people in line in certain ways, but has a controlling aspect over them, which I found very interesting. I've done a couple of shows with him. He says it gives them a limited amount of sight into different realms and certain abilities, but ultimately it controls them.
You know that Baldur's Gate 3, the game, is...
I've never played. I'm not really familiar, no.
Literally about that.
No
it's
shit.
Literally like this Cthulhu figure, and they put a parasite, and then you're linked to a hive mind of these Cthulhu alien beings. By the way, I stream every Tuesday night on Twitch for those interested. Twitch.tv/101 podcast every Tuesday night around 7 p.m. Eastern. I stream various games. It's usually me just cracking dick jokes and laughing with the chat. It's a really great time. If you want to check me out on there. But yeah, dude, Baldur's Gate 3 is literally about this, and you have to find a way to get this entity or this worm entity out of your body, or else it's gonna like implode in on itself, and then your head's gonna explode or something like that. So it's a possibility. I've heard other ideas as to why they get the black eye. One of them being that the forcing of the sacral chakra, which is near your gooch, so use your imagination, forcing open to that, right, will also drive and explode these vessels around your eyes. So they say that maybe that's part of the initiation ritual. Who knows, right? Because it's all about, right, the third eye. Well, for some people, the third eye is the brown eye. For some other ones, it's the tip of your rod, and then for other people, it's like, oh no, it's a literal third eye here, or it's the pineal gland. So we're still trying to find that third eye, and this is an example, right? For example, some have tried trepanation as a means of emulating the third eye in order to achieve clairvoyance, or as a mean of maintaining a permanent state of euphoria. Okay, and so one of the main guys on this, and I found it interesting because he actually has the same birthday as I, April 23rd, 1934, and he died August 30th, 2004.
August
Hugo
30th is
Bart
my birthday,
Hughes.
dude. Yes.
Dude,
yes.
what? Dude,
Illuminati confirmed.
Fucking
what
confirmed,
the heck?
man.
No way.
Yes. I'm not shitting you.
Dude.
I'm not shitting you.
That's
It is
weird,
weird.
bro.
I got
That's
a little
so
chill
weird.
there.
All right. Yeah. So Hugo Bart Hughes, that's bizarre. That's great. You got to clip that part.
Yeah.
Was a Dutch librarian and proponent of trepanation. He attended medical school at the University of Amsterdam, but was refused a degree due to his advocacy of LSD research and naming his daughter Maria Juana, or so Maria Juana. Okay, so again, poor girl. In 1964, he published The Mechanisms of Brain Blood Volume. Now, you can actually look up all these papers. I have a couple of them because the guys that created the cortical homunculus were also pretty much drilling into people's skulls. Okay, and the cortical homunculus is the cortex, man, which is the homunculus as a, the big hands, big mouth, big head, and it's supposed to be a neural map of how our body views, how our brain views the body. Now, the problem with that, and the interesting part, which I'll get to it. So the blood brain volume, and known as Homo sapiens correctus, a scroll in which he proposed that trepanation could be used to enhance brain functionality by balancing the proportion of blood and cerebral spinal fluid. What I was mentioning earlier, they say that by doing this, you're driving more oxygen and more blood to your brain because you're removing a piece of your skull. Therefore, it's able to expand more. And then by that it's going to give you an altered state of consciousness automatically. Maybe this is why the Greys have big heads.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like Lamb had a big head, like demons also.
The possibilities of
big...
the ancient humanoids that have the elongated skulls that weren't manufactured themselves, basically.
Pretty much. Hughes believed that when mankind began to walk upright, our brains drained of blood, and that trepanation allowed the blood to better flow in and out of the brain, causing a permanent high. And this is what people who have done this talk about. They talk about feeling a sense of euphoria and a sense of it, one of the guys said, if cannabis is an 80, this is a 30, right, in the high scale. And this guy, using a foot operated electric dentist drill, Hughes drilled a hole into a skull on January 6th, 1965. So maybe January 6th has some sort of occult and esoteric connotation there. But he also published Trepanation, A Cure for Psychosis, in which he expanded upon his theory and autobiography, The Book with the Hole, in 1972. In the 1970s, Hughes and his girlfriend, Evelyn Van Dijk, I guess is how you say her name, made several comics promoting Trepanation. And he went to go on and influence a couple other people. Another major guy in this, his name is, let me find it here. In a chapter of his book, Eccentric Lives and Particular Notions, this guy died April 24th, and his name was, find it here and put this dude's name. Anyways, Mitchell, let me see. His name is, this might be the same guy. Anyways, again, I'm still working on this presentation. In a chapter of his book, Eccentric Lives and Peculiar Notions, esotericist John Mitchell cites Hughes as pioneering the idea of trepanning in his 1962 monograph, Homo sapiens correctus, which is often cited by advocates of self-trepanation. So a lot of people, this guy created like a cult. A lot of people that talk about self-trepanation and buy all the little self-drilling kits to their skull, they talk about this guy's research. And all the research that people really present is like, well, I did it because of this guy's research. Right? Like, because he said it and it does this and this and this. So is there a sort of placebo effect maybe going on? Maybe, perhaps, right? It's like, hey, this guarantees you eternal life. You do it and you get eternal life. Or you feel as if you have eternal, like you did it, I can feel like I can live forever. Yeah. I feel more rejuvenated, more strong, like I feel more enlightened by doing this sort of thing. So again, maybe that's it. Now, among other arguments, Hughes contends that children have a higher state of consciousness because children's skulls are not fully closed. One can return to an earlier childlike state of consciousness by self-trepanation. Further, by allowing the brain to freely pulse, Hughes argues that a number of benefits will occur. We know that little babies have, right, their skulls aren't joined together, and some people's skulls don't join together, right? So there are, I wouldn't call it a disorder, but there are conditions in which people's skulls don't fully form together. So they end up still having, are those people more ESP prone or clairvoyant? Like, are those the people who do tarot readings or something? Like, I don't know, because I mean, last time I checked, I think my skull,
it seems like there's many different physiological factors that people could have that could cause them to be more clairvoyant or open to these astral realms or spirit realms, whether they're born with a quote-unquote defect or what's considered a even deformity, may be beneficial for them to access some of this stuff, right?
Yes. And again, we don't know what those are. Right, like it could be any number of things. Maybe if you had, like, the other day, and hopefully she's not listening to this, but the other day I went to the bank, right, to open up a bank account for the podcast, right, and I was gonna be opening up an account to pay my video clips guy, and my video clips guy, shout out to Joe Thomas, he's into Nephilim a lot, and the Nephilim story is that they have 6 fingers, 6 toes, right, and they have an extra row of teeth, etc., etc. Well, what if I told you that the lady who was opening up my bank account that day had 6 fingers?
Are you shitting me? I've never seen this in a person. I've always, in a very weird way, wanted to see it.
Illuminati confirmed.
But hey, man, you've seen it.
Listen, dude, it was weird. All right. Now, again, she was a very nice lady and she has all my information, so she could technically look me up. Okay. I'm just saying that I think she was a very nice lady and she helped me.
You're going to wake up to a 6-fingered lady giving you some trepidation.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, you talk about this podcast ever again and we'll trepan you until you. So again, that was bizarre.
Yeah.
Okay. That was weird. But anyways, so we have a heartbeat in the brain which is lost, right? No one's ever seen it. I think his name is Hamilton Morris, I think is his name or something like that. The pharmacopoeia guy, the psychedelic guy. Let me find his name so I don't keep saying.
I think it's Hamilton something.
Hamilton Morris. He's been on Joe Rogan. He's got the YouTube channel Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia. Right. Here we go. Yeah, he did a whole episode on this. Okay, and again, this is where bits and pieces of that lost video, that documentary, were shown. They showed clips of it. So, anyways, we have this whole thing in 2023. Michael Raduga, a Russian lucid dreamer researcher, performed self-neurosurgery that included trepanation, electrode implantation, and electrical stimulation of the motor cortex. The goal was to stimulate the brain during REM sleep paralysis, and lucid dreams. So you got guys who are interested in dreams also doing this trepanation on themselves in order to put cathodes and stuff on his brain. I mean, that's so crazy, dude. The fact that people will actually literally listen to anything that they see and read about. And it's scary because it makes me think of all these TikTok challenges that people do and all these things that people do to get clicks and gain more fame and power. That's kind of sort of like a higher state of consciousness in some sort of weird way, right? People doing these, and a lot of times it goes bad for them. So in this, one of the interesting aspects of the cortical homunculus, which I'm sure you've seen it, the cortical homunculus is a picture of how our brain sees our bodies. I talked about the guy doing the trepanation. He covers his left eye and he's able to see these monstrosities on people in this astral form. You know, as soon as he takes his hand off, he can see people normally. But then he goes on this quest within the show and the manga, the movie, to talk to people as to why their homunculus looks like that. Right? For example, one of the ones is this Yakuza boss. Right? You know, they cut the pinkies off. Yeah. And it turns out his is like a huge robot, almost looks like a Gundam. And inside the Gundam, there's a little boy, right? A crying little boy. And when he's looking at him, he goes, "Who's the little boy and why is he crying?" And the guy goes, "You know, tough guy, you shut up. You know, I'm going to cut your pinky off, whatever." And he starts like touching him. And it's weird. And it's funny because some dudes walk in as he's like touching him or whatever. He, not sexually. He was just like trying to like get to the bottom of like why he was experiencing this trauma, because the homunculus are these traumas that are attached to the person. It forms it molds the person into the person that they are. And so he's like touching him, trying to get to the bottom of why he's doing that. And it turns out that when he was a little boy, he accidentally cut off the finger of one of his childhood friends. Oh, wow. And he carried that guilt throughout his entire life. So once the main character, again, he's like the ultimate Jungian psychologist, able to see in like people's deepest, darkest traumas and extract them out. The problem with that is when he was able to help this guy get rid of his homunculus at the cost of the homunculus coming onto him. So now when he's covering his eye looking down, now he's got a robot arm because a piece of that homunculus attached himself to him. So it's like, at what cost are you able to help people? And again, the homunculus that you're peering into are peering right back at you. You're staring into the abyss and the abyss is staring right back at you. So at what cost is it that you're able to help people? But then at the end of it all, the goal at the end of it all is to ultimately find yourself. Because you don't know what your homunculus looks like, right? And in order to love yourself, Chris, you got to love your homunculus. So the moral of the story is that.
Dude, I love it. There seems to be layers of our reality. We have our physical material realm, and then there seems to be multiple layers beyond that, above and below, if you will, with different intelligences, with different fields of information, an ecosystem. Also, each of those layers has a piece of our consciousness that is doing work in certain ways, having different jobs to do, living its own astral life in certain ways, and sometimes we connect with that. And I've done a show recently, I forget who it was with, but the young lady believes that when people are talking about experiences where they believe they're a super soldier or in a secret space program, that there may be something happening in their consciousness where they're reaching other outside layers and they're confusing it with some sort of reality. It may be a reality in that realm, but they, for some reason, they have more memory of it, or they're accessing it more, and they're taking it back and they're equating it to alien abductions or some sort of secret space missions. And I wonder if it's just accessing some of these other realms.
Have you ever read Fritz Springmeier's his grimoire, essentially, on how the Illuminati create undetectable mind-controlled slaves? Have you ever read that?
No, I have not.
You should check it out. Because essentially the alien abduction phenomenon is fake and gay.
Right.
And it is used to implant people with memories in order for them to forget about the sexual trauma they've gone through.
That's the other possibility. Right? It's intentionally done. Like this is some sort of experiment or psychological operation.
Yeah. And this is how people, there's people who go around podcasts talking about, I'm probably gonna know what I'm talking about. I'm a sleeper cell, right? Like I've done this, and this, and it's like, if you really did do all that, you think that they would let you walk around saying that? Maybe you're saying it because it never really happened, right? It's like, so again, I think that the most dangerous information that anyone can have, and I've always said this, is not about, right? Because part of the whole wanting ESP or godlike powers is also the Faustian Pact, which is one of like the main ones that people talk about, like, oh, he made a deal with the devil, right? All these rappers made a deal with the devil. That's why they're famous. They gave up their soul. What was all the baby oil for? Like all this sort of stuff. Like what's really happening behind the scenes? Are they actually making deals with the devil? But one of the main ones is that one, making the deal with the devil. And also using that to acquire, right, this altered state of consciousness. And my whole thing is that the information that's dangerous is not that the one that the devil told you or that the Illuminati told you or anything like that. The information, in my opinion, that is, and this is why you get guys like, the EpiPen guy, Epstein, like that whole guy, not to put out too many words to trip the algorithm, but that you get guys like that and like the Diddler who run operations that are very similar, because I think that the information that is detrimental to your health that will get you Clinton is the information of, hey, you walked in at the wrong time and saw somebody doing something inappropriate to another entity or another individual. You get my drift, right? Or you were caught on camera doing that thing, and now they can blackmail you. So now either you suffer the consequences when they blackmail you, or you play ball. Right. And again, I'm not saying that there can't be some occult significance. That I'm sure that there is. Maybe, maybe not. But that's more tangible, right? I caught this guy on camera doing XYZ to who, and now we got him. All we got to do is make a couple phone calls. Hey, did you order all the pizza boxes? Oh, I got a ton of hot dogs, We got $65,000 worth of hot dogs or whatever it was. It's like, that's bizarre. And then the other email, hey, I told you not to be doing this here at the White House. It's like, well, you can't eat hot dogs at the White House? You can't eat pizza? You can't have pizza parties at the White House? Why? What's wrong with the pizza? Right? So I think that that's the information people have to watch out for when it comes to these elites. Or maybe, who knows, dude? Maybe they are getting injected with Cthulhu parasites in their brain, and they're being controlled by the Cthulhu hive mind. And, the Illuminati is going to keep sending, hurricanes from their foreskin to hit Florida. Like, who knows, right? But one important thing to add, because we're talking about monstrosities, we're talking about monsters. And maybe if you think about it, maybe this is where demonology originates from, right? Where people are able to see behind the scenes and see these monstrosities behind the scenes that are maybe roaming around. But although dramatic figures of the cortical homuncula have been reproduced in various textbooks, encyclopedias, and medical texts as illustrations, because the homunculus is an actual medical term. And essentially, we all have our own homunculus on our brain, according to the medicine, according to the field, okay? So this is an actual medical concept, not the alchemical. Okay. As illustrations of cortical mapping, they oversimplify how the body's sensory motor signals are actually processed in the brain. And this is the interesting part, the homunculi drawings and models suggest that there is a clear-cut, orderly separation between the sensory cortex and the motor cortex, but there is no such separation. The oversimplification reflected in the homunculi was due to the challenge of converting the original data points into images. So essentially, our homunculi, this picture, it could be very well like a monster, could look like a monster because we see it as got its head, got its lips, got its arms. It probably doesn't look like that to our brain. It probably looks like a blob of some sort, maybe a Cthulhu like monster, speaking of Lovecraft, and maybe him seeing it, right, getting his ideas from the dream realm, from these night terrors. So that's also a possibility that we even view ourselves as monstrosities. So again, this manga and this whole homunculus thing really goes down to the deep core of like our subconscious, and it goes into the darkest, deepest depths of a human psyche, essentially. And that's what the manga really is about. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a whole presentation more in depth on the actual manga and the movie. And the guy who, one last thing here, the guy who actually came up with the cortical homunculus, long story short, what they were actually doing was they took a whole bunch of patients and they went around zapping at their brain to try and find out what part affected which one. And they drew a map of that. And from there is where you get the cortex man, which is the drawing. If you Google homunculus right now, that's probably what you're going to get. But I saw this statement somewhere and I couldn't find a source for it. So take this with a grain of salt. This was, I think, on the guy's Wikipedia page. And then when I try to dig deeper for a source, I couldn't find it. But he said a statement, and the statement was that essentially, let me find it here. Anyways, the guy that came up with it, his name is Wilder Penfield or Wilder Penfield. I don't know. Wilder Penfield. What a weird name. And he said something along the lines, or somebody said that he said something along the lines of that he came up with the concept of the homunculus because he imagined a fictional realm where these miniature human figures would exist, which he playfully called If. So essentially, this guy who the cortical homunculus is attributed to said that he came up with the idea of wanting to find out if we had a sort of cortical homunculus because of this fictional realm, this other realm. Again, goes back into what we've been talking about, the astral realm, the Midgard, or whatever, whatever you want to call it, heaven, whatever you want to call it, Mickey Mouse, blah, 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 whatever, Disney World, who knows? It's this other realm, and that these things exist on that realm. And so Penfield's homunculus was not meant to be a literal representation of the brain, but rather a tool to visualize how different body parts are represented in the cerebral cortex, making it a thought experiment. If as an imaginary world, and the if mentioned here refers to a hypothetical space where these homunculi would live, allowing Penfield to further conceptualize the idea beyond its purely neurological function. So again, this is what the AI told me, and I try to find the actual, I was like, maybe it's in a biography, or maybe it's somewhere else in a medical paper, blah, blah, blah. Couldn't find it. So just take that for what it is, but it was, I think, on his Wikipedia page. But
this goes back to the possible
dude,
layers of reality that I've heard discussed, that there's an imaginal plane where our thoughts and our creations from our imagination live and take on lives of their own and could possibly even affect others in the collective.
Where do your imaginary friends go? Yeah. It's like the imaginary friend you had, and they did actually, dude, hold on. There's actually an If movie with Ryan Reynolds and Steve Carell.
Really?
And it's about that, about imaginary friends. Yeah.
They had a recent movie called Imaginary. It wasn't that good, but it basically covers the same thing. This little girl has an imaginary friend, teddy bear, that basically exists in this other realm, and they're able to travel there astrally and fight this imaginal monster, but same concept.
Yeah. Again, I think it's a possibility every time you go to sleep and come back, are you the same person? I mean, you really don't ever
Yeah.
know, right? I mean, that's also a possibility. And remembering these other lives, I think that it's a lot more malleable than we've been told. And the fact that this has been documented throughout all of history, there's something to be said there. Even if it's purely neurological or psychological or something, there's still something there. And by it being psychological, by you thinking about it, does it project it and does it become real? How you said somewhere else, we don't know. But yeah, I'll be doing a more in-depth breakdown on my channel about the Homunculus movie and the manga. And this is just a little excerpt of that part as to what trepanation is, what the purposes of it are, and again, the history, a little bit about the cortical homunculus and how that became a thing in the medical field. And they use it now. Everyone has a homunculus. It's in your brain.
That's so crazy.
And it's how your brain views your body. It's
Yeah.
wild, dude.
Well, this was a great introduction into the information. Give everybody a little taste of this. Get them wanting some more weirdness. This was great, man. Always enjoy the conversation. Before we close it out, just remind everybody where to find you again.
You got to do the same too, because I'm going to put this out for my people as well. You can find me at tjojp.com. And on there, you can get your Homunculus, the Chosen One comic book. Get that on there. Got issue 1 and issue 2. You got the Occultus Mundi with the latest issue being the Homunculus edition. All about the history of the alchemical homunculus, as well as if you do happen to stumble across a homunculus and you don't know how to take care of it, I've got you covered because we have the Homunculus Owner's Manual, which is 33 pages of homunculus goodness and how to take care of your homunculus in case you don't know how, because I know it can be challenging, but we got you covered there. And I will be announcing very soon where people can sign up for what I'm going to be calling for right now, the Alchemy trading card game. We are in the play test phase, and you'll be able to play as all your favorite occultists or alchemists or esotericists. We got Manly P. Hall on there. Well, look at this ceremony card. It's a Crossing of the Abyss. We have a Smoky Quartz Egg relic. John D had a Smoky Quartz Egg. Wrote the Cartesian Theater, which is all homunculus all the way down.
Man.
We got a whole bunch of stuff, dude. It's gonna be fermented homunculus blood. I don't know. It's gonna be.
I love it, man.
So,
All right, man. This was great. We'll definitely be doing it again.
where can people find you?
All right. Yes,
on my
people
end?
can find me. ForbiddenKnowledge.news, the website. We're on all podcast platforms, Forbidden Knowledge News and Rokfin, Rumble, and we just created a new YouTube. We'll try and keep it up there too.
Do it. Yeah.
And that's it.
Awesome, dude.
All right. Thank you again, Juan. We'll definitely be doing this again in the future. Until next time, everyone, have a wonderful evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. See y'all then.